In today's video, we're going to talk about what I think is one of the best ways to prepare for retirement, and that is test driving retirement before you pull the plug. The reason I think test driving retirement is so important is because I've seen firsthand how retirement can take life as you know it and completely flip it on its head. Often for 30 or 40 years, we find ourselves in the routine of work. We probably wake up at the same time most days, have a social group that's likely related to work. Hobbies and activities are a smaller part of your day because of work's obligation, you earn a paycheck for cash flow needs, and so on. The day you retire, so much of this changes. What is your identity now that you no longer have your regular job? What will your new routine be? How will you fill the time, and where will your cash flow come from now that you no longer have a paycheck? There are two ways to handle retirement. You can retire one day, flip life on its head, and simply roll with the punches. Or test drive retirement. Identify the problems and obstacles, and then pivot while you still have the optionality of your job. Now, in this video today, let's talk about 7 ways that you can test drive your retirement. Strategy number 1, extended time off. Having time off to test the shift that will come with retirement is an idea that we're going to continually come back to. A common trend that I see is so many workers build up their PTO or paid time off throughout the years, and then when they decide to retire, they simply use their PTO as an off-ramp into retirement. Now, PTO in this sense isn't really an off-ramp because it's really just retirement with a paycheck for a few weeks or months. I firmly believe one of the best things you can do to prepare for retirement is take a sabbatical or use your PTO ahead of retirement. Maybe let's say 12, 24, or 36 months before you actually retire. I have a few clients that have successfully done this, and the insights that they gain are tremendous. Typically, this test run needs to be done for longer than 2 weeks to be most effective. Beyond 2 weeks is long enough that it forces you to get out of your old routine and start discovering the hurdles or beauty in a new routine. Let's discuss some benefits and drawbacks of extended time off. First, everyone struggles with different transitional hurdles. Some might struggle with the lack of purpose from no longer having a job. Others might struggle with a lack of social interaction. Knowing the issues that plague you can help you overcome them when you actually pull the plug for real. One of the biggest outcomes is reframing or even potentially adjusting the main goal. For instance, what if you find that through your sabbatical that you don't want to completely retire? You actually like to have a little bit of work filling in a portion of your day. So maybe you'd rather continue to consult or maybe even work part-time. If your job or another job allows that, that's a massive insight. Your plan might be to fully pull the plug at 65. But what if you're 60 right now and you find that a modified work schedule could allow for that modification to happen immediately? Rather than fully retiring in 5 years, you can partially retire today, work part-time, and have that part-time income fill in your plan's gaps. Now, there are some minor drawbacks to sabbaticals or extended time off. First, some jobs may be incredibly constraining and not allow for something like a sabbatical or extended time off. Now, the problem is many will use this as an excuse without actually exploring the options. For instance, I'm guessing that your company has a maternity or paternity policy. Well, that is basically just a mini sabbatical for parents. So it's not that the company cannot operate without any employee taking some time off. It just might be an uncommon situation to take a sabbatical to test drive retirement, and therefore requires a careful approach to the topic. For most, the financial toll can be quite minor, especially if you and your spouse take staggered sabbaticals, or if you only take a sabbatical for a couple month period of time. Strategy number 2, test drive your retirement budget. It's amazing that more people don't do this. Many people know what their rough budget looks like while they're working. The problem is there's usually a little bit of extra built into this budget often, and there may be some work-related expenses as well. It's not uncommon that a soon-to-be retiree will tell me their desired budget, but then have a lack of confidence around this income target due to not knowing exactly what to expect. Well, we can't simulate retirement fully, but we can test our retirement budget ahead of pulling the plug. I think the best timing for this is usually within 18 months prior to retiring, and test your budget for ideally at least a year within those 18 months. A year is long enough to spread out any one-time expenses and factor in any seasonality into your spending. Initiating this can be pretty simple. Most families have 2 credit cards. I would use one credit card with everything work-related. This does not count towards that overall retirement budget. For instance, your gas budget might be a little bit higher because you commute to work. Clothes expenditures related to work might also add into that budget, etc. Then on your other credit card would be all the normal spending that you would expect to be consistent in retirement. Credit cards make everything super easy to track. Review at the end of each month like you would in retirement and see if your expectations are right in line or if they're slightly off and we might need to adjust that retirement budget. If certain budget items like travel will go up in retirement, well, we're just going to have to continue to estimate this unless you take that sabbatical that I talked about earlier. Strategy number 3, if a sabbatical or extended time off is too hard, do you have the ability to drop down to part-time work in some capacity? If we're talking about an off-ramp to retirement, this is a true off-ramp. We can see this big time in the hypothetical schedule laid out on the screen. Going from full-time work to retired all in one day is a massive shift in routine and lifestyle. But we don't have to be binary about it. Some jobs offer the ability to slow down the transition by going from full-time down to part-time and then to fully retired. Again, not every job will allow this, but exploring this as an avenue can be a great way to test drive retirement. Strategy number 4, what do you expect your day to look like in retirement? Do you have an idea on what you're going to do to fill the big time blocks that retirement now offers? Your schedule is something that we can test drive either on the weekends or more impactfully if you're following one of the strategies I talked about earlier, like taking extended time off. Often we have this idea of what retirement will look like, and it's only after testing our assumptions that we find errors in our thinking. Maybe our initial idea of retirement that given day is a bit too mundane. Maybe we have a goal of getting a certain project done and we find that we continue to delay it even if we have the extra time. The big message in this video is simply start running a test before you actually pull the plug fully. Strategy number 4, stress test your retirement. When you think about retirement and fear and anxiety start to rear their ugly head, what do you worry most about? Do you worry about retiring and then having a big market crash that causes your savings to drop by 20 to 50%? Do you worry about if you'll have enough money to last through your full retirement? Or do you worry about a specific issue like Social Security solvency or whether you're going to need long-term care during your life? These are all completely valid and normal worries. The better your retirement plan is built and the better the strength of your plan is communicated can help massively in alleviating financial related fears. For instance, say that you constantly worry about a stock market crash and what it might mean for your retirement. Well, one of the toughest decades for investing was 2000 to 2010 when we saw 2 massive stock market crashes. Well, we have the data. Let's run through an experiment of testing your plan through this lost decade. We will first look at your portfolio. Now, this portfolio is shown after withdrawing the monthly income that I'm about to show in the next slide. And from looking at this graph, we see a lot of volatility within the underlying portfolio. This is to be expected with any meaningful stock allocation when the stock market loses 50% twice in a decade. This individual's portfolio drops by more than 50% in the first decade of retirement. Now, there are 2 things I'm wanting to gain from this stress testing. First, I want to know from a big picture sense that this retiree will be fine. This goal is accomplished as we see that their plan is still on track and their portfolio later recovered. But second, I want the retiree to really internalize and imagine living through this path. Put yourself in the position of living through this. It's easy to go, perfect, I would have still had enough money to stay retired. Move on. It's entirely different to go, how would I feel losing a third of my portfolio in the first 5 years of retirement? More than $1 million reduction. Would I be plagued with anxiety and fear if I had to live through that? Now, notice that the portfolio never recovers to its all-time high. Are you comfortable with that, or are you anchored to consistently seeing more and more wealth on your statements? I want to walk a retiree through this type of analysis in multiple contexts to know that they're psychologically prepared for what might happen in retirement. Now, we believe that retirement and income planning should be dynamic. So whether a retiree uses this feature or not, we want to show that retiree whether they're able to spend more because their portfolio is doing better than expected. And the interesting thing is, despite living through some sizable portfolio volatility, this retiree actually would have been able to consistently spend more than we originally planned. Not only did big market crashes not ruin this person's retirement, but if I just showed this retiree just the income graph and nothing else, and informed them they still had sizable retirement savings left, that retiree would probably feel great. And so this is where planning becomes so important. I want to make sure we are doing the best things both quantitatively, but equally I care about preparing that retiree for retirement to ensure they are psychologically ready for all that they might face. Strategy number 6, test driving your hobbies. This is somewhat interrelated to test driving your schedule. It's not uncommon to find that people have an idea of what they're going to do in retirement, and it can be oftentimes very different than their past experiences. For instance, some retirees have a goal of traveling the world for a few years at the onset of retirement. Or maybe they dream of buying a camper and traveling the country in that camper. I completely understand the motivation for both of these goals. You've likely put off travel for a number of years while raising a family, focusing on your career, and more. Now, in retirement, you want this to be a new phase of adventure and exploration. Awesome. But this is a goal that forces a ton of planning and adjustments. Maybe your plan is to sell your house and jump in 2 feet first. The more certain we are that this is the right path for us, the easier those big weighty decisions will be. And it's very difficult to know what traveling the globe will look like if the most that you've traveled up to this point is a week or 2 weeks worth of vacations. A week to 2 week vacation is just that, a vacation. Vacations are supposed to mostly be bliss because they are short, welcome breaks from an otherwise busy life. When you travel full time, there are a ton of drawbacks that will come up, such as never having a true home base, having to whittle down your belongings, finding a place to sleep each night, a lot of planning ahead of time. What if you're right on the main goal of wanting to travel more, but you're wrong on the best way to implement said goal? Meaning that rather than traveling full time, you like going on a trip every month or every other month. Figuring this out before you build your retirement plan around extended travel is going to be really important. And then finally, strategy number 7 is one that probably won't apply to some of you if you are already close to retirement, but one I think is worth considering for younger generations. Retirement in a traditional sense was in part created because past generations used to have more labor-intensive careers, and at some point, age makes those labor-intensive careers nearly impossible. So the life cycle of a worker was to grow up, work a job for 40 years, then retire when they're no longer able to be an effective worker. The better you are at saving, the more this goal is transformed into moving retirement up so that you could retire early and enjoy more of those years wherein you are more healthy. But as we've shifted from more manual labor jobs to more brain-intensive jobs, the need to follow the traditional retirement timeline has really disappeared. Yet most people still follow this traditional timeline. And it begs the question, is there a better model? More than a decade ago, Tim Ferriss, in his book 4-Hour Workweek, popularized an idea of mini retirements. Rather than waiting until 62 to fully retire, what if you broke your working career up and you took mini retirements in between the big working blocks? These mini retirements could be planned through a job that you continue with, or could be planned as a break as you potentially switch companies. Now, every employer is different. This is not to say that this is a widely accepted practice that you could just flip a switch and enter into. Now, the upside of mini retirements is obvious. You are able to do and enjoy different things in your 30s and 40s than you otherwise could in your 60s and 70s. Now, obviously, there's also a cost to mini retirements. If you were to stop compounding and saving for a year in your 30s, that might mean you need to work an extra 2 years longer in your 60s. So if you're younger and planning out your future financial life, this is something worth thinking about. And so the next time you purchase a car, I'm going to guess that you're going to test drive some different options. Now, why is that the case? Because buying a car is a big decision, but it pales in comparison to the big decision that is when and how you retire. And yet, so many never test drive their vision of retirement. I hope from these 7 strategies you gained a few ideas of ways that you can start to test drive your retirement. If you're looking for other non-traditional approaches to retirement, I highly recommend you click on this video right here, where I talk about a potentially controversial way to format your retirement. Thanks so much for watching, and always remember, you don't need more money, you need a better plan. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.